So, Brian, who are you?
Who am I? Ask myself that every morning. Thanks for inquiring. So, I'm an aggressive New Yorker turned Midwesterner, former technologist, nowadays marketer. And just in case that wasn't enough work, doing all the world's content marketings and helping make ideas more simple and getting them popularized, I figured, hey, why don't we also throw an innovation festival this May? So,
Awesome.
that's the short
Awesome.
version. Yeah,
So,
man.
what is happiness is what for Brian Wallace?
Happiness is making a difference, because I
Ooh,
don't understand the world and its obsession with mediocrity, right? I am not a clock in, clock out guy. I'm either awake or asleep. And if you're not making a difference, what are you doing, right? Are we really
wow.
fulfilling everything that's inside of us that we are here on God's green earth to share with the world? I feel like you feel like that a lot too, Phil.
I do, but a lot of
That's
people
for
don't.
9:30 in the morning.
Right? Yeah, no, I think that's super deep, man.
Hmm.
Happiness is making a difference, but a lot of people, they don't care. They don't want to make a difference, or they think, that's too hard. So tell me,
I think
Brian,
they're
is there an
scared
easy
to. I
way?
think it's latent. I think
Oh,
everyone has this in them, but they're too afraid that if they tried, they would fail. So it's easier to just go on the path that a lot of times other people put them on. So they're just kind of other people are living vicariously through them. This wasn't meant to be like a on the couch
that's no, but that's so
thing.
but that's so interesting, right? Let's talk about that because we're talking
Yeah,
about innovation and
yeah.
community, right? And I think that you and I connected early on in the social media time,
Yes,
if
sir.
you will,
Hmm.
when you were just starting out making infographics,
That's
right
right.
around that beginning.
Hmm.
And I think about that, right? And I think about how you were obsessed with making it an awesome infographic.
Yes.
Like I remember talking to you, you're like, "This is good, but this one's better," and then
Right.
this one's better, and every time you iterated, it got a little better. But with that, you had to start somewhere. So talk to me about that, Brian. How did you get started in infographics and why was that your thing?
Well, it should be noted that myself and my firm, our creative director, second in command, and the team, we are probably one of the first handful of people, firms, or whatever in the world. So we could have been maybe third in the world. Like that was first to
Yeah.
actually do this as a thing.
Yeah.
I think it was like the middle of the year in 2007, 2008, something like that. So it's been a very long time and thousands of infographics later. I hope that we're pretty decent at it. But your question is good and it's noted because as we are talking about innovation today, I am speaking from a point of expertise of innovating an entire sector. I'm not patting myself on the back. This is just legitimately what happened. So I'm a technologist first, and I like to communicate like you, man. We might have different glasses on, but we're kind of the same guy. Slightly different shirts. Apparently, we
Yeah.
coordinated it today. Like they're pretty good complementary colors. We should go start like an ice cream store or something.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay, we'll do that later
yeah, or we could have
after the
like
conference.
quick service, fast casual. Come on, Panera, we're coming for you. So yeah, after the conference, we're gonna need a drink or two. So yeah, I didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I want to make an infographic." I got there. So first, technology was like the first thing that I spent the first decade of my career in. But I like to communicate. I don't like to just sit there hiding behind the keyboard and not talking to people. It just drives me crazy. And technology is great, but it's not. The promise of technology is great, but technology in its actual, I shouldn't even say this because I'm like going to curse Restream and we're going to get disconnected or something. Anyway, thank you technology for working right now. We really appreciate you. Thank you technology gods. But when it's not working, it's just miserable. And now imagine that like instead of you just as a user it's miserable, like that's your job. So after a while, I'm like, I cannot do this crap anymore. And I also am from New York, born and raised. I grew up in upstate or the suburbs, depending on how you look at it. New York's all about like fighting about like what territory. I think there's better things to talk about in life, but I digress. So I was sick of working for other people, sick of living in New York, and sick of technology. So what did we do? We packed up and we moved to Kentucky, of all places. So we lived in Louisville for about 8 years. Nowadays, we've been in Cincinnati, and Phil and I are pretty close to each other, if I'm allowed to say stuff like that. But you
That's
talk,
right. Yep. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Hey, can I run
Yep.
that by you live, Phil? Sure, great. All right.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
yeah, so we've been in Cincy like the last 8 years or so. So when we started our business, we didn't exactly know what we were doing. I kind of wanted to be like a portable chief technology officer type guy, but I'm like, oh wait, but I don't want to do this anymore. So like 2006 was like the dawn of the social media revolution. So I love like how systems work, but I really like human behavior and what makes people think and tick and act and buy, and like the pulse of the internet. I'm not doing like sheesh for the Gen Zs, but I'm doing a pulse like for pulse. Anyway, so I was really into social, at least like the first iteration of social. Now, like postmodern, the social dilemma, it's kind of creepy. We're the product. Go watch the movie, cry yourself to sleep. It's awful. I mean, we're on it and like we love it for things like this, but a lot of it is not meant for good. The initial underpinnings of social was amazing because it was the great equalizer. Everybody had a stage, decentralization of power, a more level playing field for the entire globe, and everything became a lot more close, right? So we were in the heyday of the early social media world, and we were doing crazy stuff. We did like some of the first stuff for John Deere. We worked with Jay-Z when the Blueprint 2 album was coming out, and we did like some of their clothing line stuff. And then it was just nuts, right? Like everybody thought they were a social media expert because they could go retweet some account on, like, I read Mashable's blog post, so I'm going to retweet that, and I'm a genius. Woo, woo. And then like 100 people would be like, oh no, Twitter is changing their background profile pixel limits. And it's like, who cares? Like, we can't do this all day. So we had a small team at the time. And I just said, all right, let's take stock of what we're actually good at. And it came down to a few core tenets. One was that we were good at storytelling. 2 was that we were good at visuals. And 3 is that we had a little secret sauce of, I'm going to say making it go viral, but I'm like gagging a little bit in my mouth because I hate that phrase. Like, you don't want everything to go viral. You want Ebola? No, like not everything should be viral. And we're just talking about like amplification, right? So like, I think we know how to make things popular, and we know how to do that with intent. So while the whole world is pretending that they're like a rock star on stage with the hype man saying, everybody make some noise, we just make signal, because the whole world makes noise all day with ads and garbage and press releases. So we make signal and we make money for people. And back in the day, in ye old internet, there used to be a place called dig.com, which was it still exists today. And for those of you who are watching who are part of, old school OG land, I mean, you were definitely around them back then in social.
Oh yeah.
I'm not calling you an old guy. I'm not sure
I'm an old guy.
Yeah, all right, fine. You call yourself that. That's fine. But I don't know how much you ever messed around with Dig. But Dig was incredible. Yeah. So like Dig was like how powerful Reddit was, but in the hands of a few. So this was when Reddit was just getting started. So if you found a story as a user and you got it to the front page of Dig, it would get so much simultaneous traffic that like the whole site would crash, and it doesn't even matter what your site is. What's crazy about Phil and everybody is there were literally 100 people, not gigantic media publications or billionaires, but just like regular dudes on the internet. 100 people were responsible for 50% of what was on that front page. And I was one of those guys. So like I said, tenet number 3, we were good at just kind of the knack of making things popular on the internet. And then I saw like 1 or 2 people on the internet doing these things called infographics. I'm like, stop the presses, hit the brakes. Let's stop with all this social media and tech crap. We're going to go do this because I know we can do it. And a lot of people thought I was insane. And I mean, they're right, but we still did it. The rest is history.
That's fantastic. So you started innovating before really innovation was even a buzzword.
Well, I mean, innovation's been around since time immemorial. I'm not sure.
Well, no. The word innovation, though. No, not actual innovation. But I think, right. No, just like going viral. To your point, right? You'd make the joke about Ebola or whatever. Right. I think things got popular, if you will, before there was an internet. And just like there was innovation before. But the word, everybody talks about, we're going to innovate, we're going to pivot, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So how do you define innovation, Brian Wallace?
So innovation sometimes gets misnomered up with technology. So I can't tell you how many times a week where people are like, okay, so you're running this crazy thing called the Innovate Summit, and we'll get back to that in a minute. And they're like, so it's a tech conference? I'm like, no, it is not a tech conference. So let's talk about 2 different schools of thought. So I'm from the East Coast, and then there's also this other thing called the West Coast. We're not throwing shade at it. I'm just, being a little funny. But they both have a little bit different viewpoint when it comes to technology, because a lot of people use those two words as if they're the same thing, and they're not. So you'll see where I'm going. Just permit me. So the West Coast, there's like a real famous guy who said once upon a time that software is eating the world. And I think when you go so one-dimensionally hard into anything, it's dangerous. Like Silicon Valley used to be like a wellspring of like all sorts of artists and creatives. And now like a lot of them are just pushed out, and it's like big tech, big tech, big tech. We must have big tech. The only thing in the world. There are no other industries. Forget it. And it's like, why? I don't understand that. So tech by itself, I mean, it's good, but it's too much of a one-dimensional thought to nowhere, and it becomes a self-serving, self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. Whereas East Coast, so I'm from New York, so like East Coast is a little bit more like, yes, tech is important, but it is one little wedge in your Trivial Pursuit wheel. Do I sound like an old guy? You can figure out the metaphor, whatever. So like places like New York also run like fashion and finance, and like just because you're a tech bro doesn't mean you're famous. Like no one cares, right? In fact, and I haven't checked this stat since pre-pandemic, but at least in the stats that I remember from my mind, there were more tech workers in New York than Silicon Valley. And you might say, how is that possible? They have Google and Facebook and Meta, whatever you call it over there. Well, how many thousands of people have to run a bank and the fashion empires of the world? So I like a more complete world that allows innovation, there's that word, not just technology, to be more well-rounded. So I've gone to things like South by Southwest for a very long time. I don't know, 15 plus years. I've been on their advisory board for a long time. And what made South by Southwest special was, and still is, innovation. So when you're not just siloed in technology and real estate and pet food and marijuana and whatever, you can break those barriers and you can learn a lot laterally and see that you have a lot of things in common, and you can make a lot of things that are not obvious really interesting. So the South by Southwest and similar types of conferences in the world have been a kingmaker and have popularized things such as Twitter. Okay, maybe people don't like it today, but the fact of innovating real-time news is an incredible achievement. It doesn't matter what you think about politics, Elon Musk, who owns it, whatever. Like the communications medium is what we're talking about. So please, everybody, don't lose focus when I say Twitter or X or whatever the heck we're supposed to call it now. But also you had Foursquare and geolocation and live streaming like we're on right now. So a precursor of Restream was invented there, and Giving Tuesday. So movements happen when you don't just have everybody that looks like Phil and everybody that looks like Brian that come from different places and have different diversity of thought and lived experience. So there you go.
That's fantastic. That's a long answer that makes a lot of sense, that does require a lot more than just a soundbite. And I really appreciate that, you saying that, Brian. Because one of the things that I heard in there is that it's a bunch of communities that are able to work together and coalesce for good and make things different and bigger and better because they're not just one thing. Did I hear that right?
You sure did, man.
Good.
Nice.
So yeah. So with that, right, let's talk about the power of community and this Innovate Summit that we're both going to be at. You're organizing, for some crazy reason, you decided to ask me to speak at it, which I certainly appreciate. So let's talk about that. What is going on? What and why the hell is it in nowhere, Kentucky?
Well, it does have a name. It's Owensboro, Kentucky. I usually say nowhere, but that's fine.
Oh, so, I just mispronounced it. Owensboro.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's sometimes read as nowhere. Hey, it happens to be the fourth largest city in Kentucky, but like for me, that's hilarious because that metro area is like maybe 80 to 100,000 people. That's like saying I finished fourth in a sprint race with Usain Bolt as number one because I finished tomorrow. Like it's not a big city, guys. But how did we get there? I could tell you briefly the story on that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so for the better part of the last decade and a half plus, I've lived in what's called the bluegrass region of the United States. Bluegrass for its music, literal grass, different cultural things, and a lot of bourbon. Not that I sit there and partake so much, once in a while. Not so much. I'm not a bourbon snob, so you can get off easy with me.
Too bad.
Yeah, I know. We'll work on me. It's fine.
All right, good.
So because we're in this region, a lot of people that run these brands of the world like hiring us for doing content marketing and infographics and visual storytelling and press and all the stuff I already said that I'm not going to take more time on. And one of my buddies who used to work for one of the big brands went to become the head of marketing for one of the oldest bourbon brands there is, called Green River Bourbon. Not sure if you ever heard of it, but here's where it lands. So most of the stuff that's on the Bourbon Trail, for those of you that are in major metro areas, it's not like literally like a mile apart. Like they're way out in Kentucky that aren't even cities and like little hollers and crazy roads that you don't want to be driving after dark because you're never going to find your way back, right? Like it is remote, okay? Most of them are not based in cities, but Green River is based in, drumroll, Owensboro, Kentucky. Boom. So
awesome.
We were going to work together. They got acquired by a big hedge fund. We didn't get the job. But then my buddy who was working at the place started talking to the city. And they're like, man, we just built a $200 million waterfront and have the International Bluegrass Hall of Fame, all these waterworks like from the Bellagio or whatever, all these nice hotels that are right on the riverfront, one of the largest children's parks in the world, and a gigantic freaking convention center. So I guess they watched Field of Dreams that night and just got all this money together. And they're like, we need more people to visit, economic development, lay roots, vacation, check out music, have a good time. I mean, it has major wealth and it's living well, right? Like we talked about, like living with meaning and intentionality. Living isn't just like clock in, clock out, sit in traffic all day. Like these guys are living well. Like you will see this riverfront and you will just be like, I mean, outside of the riverfront, not necessarily like the most exciting stuff. It's just a regular small city, but this thing is insane. So they're like, well, how do we get people here? I'm like, well, I mean, I've been on South by Southwest advisory board for half a decade, and I know tons of keynote speakers, and I know a thing or two about community, and I have a pretty large following on the internet that will listen to me, and they'll hear me out. Because when people have intentionality and focus and a reason to do something, they'll even go to Burning Man. And Burning Man's in the freaking desert. That doesn't even have infrastructure. It doesn't even have roads or bathrooms. Like they just set up shop. So if people can go to Burning Man, they can come to this. We don't even have to take your clothes off. We prefer you don't. We're not zoned for that. What are we even talking about? So you don't need me on more bourbon, man. So that's how we got here. Yep.
Okay. So with that, right? Innovation, community, and then we throw in the next part that you mentioned there, and that is some place that people want to go that they don't know about, right? We're creating a destination that people are going to get excited about, that they're going to learn about, that they're going to understand. So that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. So, so talk to me about more of what's going on at the summit. Why should people go to this thing?
Well, I mean, I'm putting a lot of my brain power in it and I don't waste time on garbage. So that should be enough for most people. But since we got to talk about more things, we'll do that. By the way, it's theinnovatesummit.com because Chuck did a domain name in 2023, 24, right? It's probably not the best grammatical English, but you're going to have an incredible amount of star firepower that are coming in from all over the country. There's people coming in from all over the world. So if you need a job, if you're looking for business development in this greater region, if you want to meet the who's who of who's out here, and it's so many facets, right? We're going to have people talking about AI. We're going to have people talking about how do you do cyber offense against AI from taking over things, right? Stuff that you wouldn't see at just an event. And it's so diverse. We're going to talk about the future of disrupting education and have a whole debate about it. We're going to have people that are talking about the future of work and what does the workplace of the future look like, right? I think some guy's going to talk about happiness or something, if I heard correctly. Maybe
that's what it's on the website. It must be true,
right? Yeah. So like, I'm all about like place matters, intentionality, and focus. So like, it's almost like a blessing in disguise that we're at such a remote place, because usually what happens, you're trying to meet all these amazing people and they immediately like they speak and they're like out of there and at the airport. Now they're like stranded for 2.5 days. Where are they going to go? Like they're just stuck on the waterfront, right? So you might actually have a minute to talk to people.
Yeah, creating those collisions is important. So I haven't, and I'll tell you, I haven't seen the whole agenda. I saw that I'm speaking, and that's good by me.
Yes.
So, and I saw a bunch of other folks that I'm excited about. Troy Sandage, I saw it's going to be there. Chad Elia Peterson is going to be there. You'll be there. Lots of great folks. So is there time scheduled for collisions so that we can actually do those things that you're talking about, Brian, and actually maybe create some community?
Yes. So the whole agenda is on the site. If you just click on agenda, you can see all the speaker bios and stuff. So that is almost all the way done, but is always in progress as things get closer, and we're always kind of refactoring and thinking about what's a good experience. Because one thing that drives me insane about every conference I ever go to, they're great at taking your money and sponsorship, and like they don't bother with like hospitality of what's important to you. That's what I'm talking about here, right? I could go on a whole tangent on that if you really want to hear.
So hold on. So I do want to talk about that because I think that's important, right? As we think about community is not just attendees, because without an influx of capital, it makes it very difficult. So talk to me about that, about how you made sure that you turned our sponsors into partners.
Sure. So it just kind of hit me in a flash a few weeks ago. So what I've said, it's not rehearsed, but it's the stream of consciousness that's been brewing in intensity over the last month or two. So here's what I've been thinking about, why I think a lot of yesterday's events are old news and there has to be a new movement. Am I saying that Innovate is going to change the game across the globe? Of course not. I'm not insane. I hope we'll have like some piece of that. But here's my little rant when it comes to this. And it's important to understand this so you see where I'm coming from. So once upon a time, there is a super brand in the world of travel and hospitality called the Ritz-Carlton. Everybody's heard of it. Have you stayed at it? Maybe, maybe not. Is it a fortune? Yeah, like it's not, I'm not going to throw shade to, it's not some motel brand, right? So here's the thing. What happens when those guys that are so good at hospitality, you go for your wedding, you go for your anniversary, and they remember like what you like for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and how you like this and that, right? Like they know everything about you because they understand how to operate on a modality of a concierge base of truly hospitality, right? So here's the thing. They were so good at it, they literally invented something called the 5-Star Diamond Hospitality School of Ritz-Carlton. So what does it have to do with anything, Brian? Are you having a stroke? Just permit me a little bit more. We'll get there. So there's this place called Apple. I think you've heard of it. They make these things, these glass bricks that we stare at all day. Yeah. Okay. So Apple one day decided, you know what? We should really get into retail. And instead of sucking like everybody else with these checked out people that don't want to help you, we're not going to learn how to retail like a retailer. We're going to learn how to retail from hospitality. And they went to 5-Star Diamond School. And back in the day, going to the Apple store sucks these days. So if you're listening, Apple, like go back to classic Apple. I don't know what happened. But back in the day, and you can probably, if you've ever been there, you'll know too, Phil. People, I mean, it was crazy. You'd be in and out in like 2.5 minutes and you'd be smiling. And your wallet wouldn't be smiling, but you'd be smiling. So like you'd walk in, there'd be like a line of sight guy stationed like he was trained from the freaking military to make eye contact, smile, call you over and say, what do you need? Get you over to the next guy. Okay, cool. I want my AirPods Pro. Awesome. Not a product placement. Just happens to be sitting here. I want my AirPods. Cool. So then some guy's going to like pirouette from the other room out of like just a frame of glass that you didn't even know is a door or whatever, right? And he just comes out, he hands you the thing, you don't wait in line, the guy checks you out an iPad, you touch your phone to it, and you're done. And it's magical, and it is seamless. And no event does that. Every event's like, yes, that will be $1,000, and here is your badge. How would you like to sponsor? Here's our sponsorship deck, blah, blah, blah. And nobody says, hey, Phil, who are you? Tell me about you. What are you interested in? What do you want to get out of this? Cool. You should go to this, this, and this, and here's 3 people you should meet. Anybody could do it, but they don't want to work that hard because like I woke up this morning, making it matter. So did you. That's why we get along. That's why we're on this stream. We don't want those, not even try-hards, try-easies. I don't know. I got to make up a word. Just people that are still sleeping. I don't know. I'm not here to criticize humanity. I'm here to lift us up a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about. And Mark Calitri says, right, the whole event, right, gain access to a bunch of thought leaders, a bunch of startups, VC firms, large corporations, I'd say small companies as well, right? The best and brightest in the Midwest and beyond. This is great, Mark. Thank you for sharing that, because I totally agree, right? We've got so much opportunity here. So, Brian.
And by the way, Mark runs Visit Owensboro. So
well, fantastic.
So you're going to be seeing Mark in just a few weeks here. Yep.
That's awesome. Fantastic. Well, Mark, it's nice to meet you. I'm glad that you're on. So with that, Brian, we know that folks should absolutely go to the innovatesummit.com. But if they want to start thinking a little bit more about innovation, community, and then connecting those together, what should they start thinking about? What should they start doing?
That is a hard lift to do by yourself. So the power of community is to try to do that with other people, right? It is very difficult to start a movement. I'm going to answer that with, I don't know why I'm on storytelling kick today, Phil, but it's just like, that's just built for live stream. And this is just how I think. There was an amazing TED Talk that was from several years ago talking about how everybody focuses on the leader and nobody focuses on the first follower. Leaders are crazy people that you don't necessarily want to work for. We're a pain in the butt. Like, would you want to work for Steve Jobs? Like, how many people did he make cry like every day? Right? Like, he'd go park in like the handicap spot every time. Like, I don't know. Some of these guys, they're a little bit much, but it takes that to kind of move things into a new gear for humanity, right? So this guy is talking about in this TED Talk about the leader, like, just leave the leader alone for a second. And he has a video of some music conference, could be Woodstock, I don't know, whatever it is, doesn't matter. So there's a bunch of people that it looks like they're enjoying some sort of music concert, and they are sitting on a bunch of towels and blankets and stuff, having some picnics, having a good old time, just sitting on some grassy knoll or whatever, right? And then one guy just gets up. I'm not going to do it, but I mean, I could if you want me to, Phil. But
no, let's not. No.
This
You'll get out of frame. It won't be.
This is like the button. Yeah, this is the buttoned up. This ain't Burning Man. So Burning Man guys, we love you, but you go do that over there in Black Rock Desert. So we're going to keep our clothes on, and we're going to keep our button shirts on. All right. So the guy gets up and he starts just dancing around, and he's crazy, otherwise known as a leader. And we don't care about him because everybody's like, what the heck is that guy doing? I don't want any part of that. I'm just going to sit on this blanket. I don't want to look stupid in society. But then the next guy gets up, and he's the first follower, otherwise known as the real leader. And this is what people miss. He's normalizing a behavior that is too weird for society. And then you start to see more people are going in and joining the gang. And then the people that are sitting on the blankets are the weird one. And they don't want to do that because they don't want to look weird in that social construct. And that's everything. So I would advise that you don't start it by yourself. So you got to find some wackadoos like me, because I'm not sure you'll want all that because it's painful, right? It is not easy to go from 0 to 1. That's what my advice would be on that.
Find a few people that you can trust, that you want to work with, that you want to spend a few days, a few months, a few years with. Exactly. And get started. Great stuff, Brian. Now, again, we're going to just remind folks, go to theinnovatesummit.com. I'll give you a little secret. If you put in the code Gerbyshak, if you can spell my name, you get 20% off we're giving them, Brian?
I think we should give them more if they spell your whole name. But
if they spell my whole name,
okay. It's your name and 20, I think is.
And 20, that's right. Gerbyshak 20. To get 20% off, you go to theinnovatesummit.com. Gerbyshak is Gerbyshak, Gerbyshak 20 at theinnovatesummit.com. You get 20% off. Brian, if folks want to get more from you, my friend, where should they go?
So as much as people might think I'm a social media butterfly, I don't really love most social media. So I just tell people, just come hang out with me on LinkedIn. They're like, LinkedIn's not fun. That's a whole other ball of wax for another day. But you'll see much more of my stuff on LinkedIn, and sometimes also copied and pasted to other places. So just look me up on LinkedIn. There's probably thousands of people named Brian Wallace on LinkedIn, but I'm the one that's Brian Wallace at Now Sourcing.
There you go. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Brian. This was great, man.